Warning, the following video has flashing lights and also includes content that may be deemed inappropriate for some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. The Wendigo guy, Ryan Tremblay. Once again, I see you have found your way through the darkness and into the fox den for this episode of Midnight Lycanthropy here on LordeStarfox Radio. Yes, that was absolutely delicious, and I could sit here and feed all night. Yet it is time for the Wendigo guy and myself to take a walk into the darkness known as the Dogman.
Stood up. I said, oh my god, it's a werewolf. And everybody in the car freaked out.
My creatures of the night, again, we have met to sit around the late night fire and burn the timber as we read some more from the Midnight Society book. And again, Ryan Tremblay has made his way through the dense and dark and foggy forest to sit down with us. But again, he is the Wendigo guy. So what is some dark, foggy forest to him? How you doing tonight, man?
I am doing great. How are you tonight, Kenny?
Just been grinding away, my friend. I feel like I just spoke to you, 20 minutes ago on a podcast I was rolling on, which is pretty good stuff.
Yep.
And now
Sure did.
I am, just linking up with you, watching a little bit of a dual survival in the background with Cody Lundeen. And after that, I have about, 25, maybe 28 more minutes on a video I'd like to edit. So that's about it, man. You?
Oh, very cool. I've been grinding away, man. And speaking of podcasts, I am bringing my show back. So if people want to look up Let the Monsters In with Ryan Tremblay, that show's going to be returning next week. I'm going to be sitting down and doing a show on Friday. So check that out. And I'm also kind of looking into a little mystery here, Kenny. I think this is something you're going to find super, super interesting, okay? So this is a Choctaw story. And, the Choctaw live down in the area of Oklahoma. And, there's a story about the Bigfoot versus the Dogman. And I'm curious if you've ever heard of anything like this before.
Wow, great stuff right there, because I have heard about the one where I mentioned it to you about LaFleur, correct, right? And how
Right.
supposedly they had the battle with the Sasquatch. And like you said, It's kind of hard with oral tradition because the natives have been burned so much that they don't necessarily write it down. But a lot of things do hint to that occurring. And no, I did not know that was another Choctaw legend, because I had heard of an indigenous tribe that had more or less tricked, I don't know which side, either the Dogman or the Sasquatch, into having confrontations with each other for them to leave an area. And I didn't know if it was that one, and if it's another one, that's totally awesome. But before I let you blow my mind with that, dude, hyenas, bro, back in the prehistoric times, dude, used to hunt dolphins, bro. Yes.
Oh,
They would hunt prehistoric dolphins, man. They would literally jump in the water and yum, yum, yum. So,
what?
some more insanity with hyenas, bro.
Wow, dude, hyenas are just crazy. They're mean machines, aren't they?
Man, yeah, and that just goes to show you, like, I mean, we're going to be able to talk about it more in the future, but there's the larger sizes and variants of them, and yes, people always think it's the big bad lion in Africa. No, dude, the spotted hyena is the king of the jungle, if everyone wants to roll
Mhm.
with that. They honestly have, no exaggeration, a 90% success ratio on hunting because they have such large packs, okay? So when they roll with a pack of 60, there's actually been packs up to 100 and plus that are just rolling. Think how many gazelle you can get in one swipe like that. Lions and such, man, they're below 50% in their hunting, like much below that. So it really throws a twist into what people think, man. That hyenas, of course, will take a scavenged thing that's
Sure.
unalived. Any animal will, but dude, they hunt down water buffaloes and things all the dang time.
I got to tell you, man, if I ever ran into a pack of hyenas, I would just put my head between my legs and kiss my butt goodbye. Honestly, I mean, those things are powerful bites, dude. The bite pressure of their jaws is like, whoa.
Yes, it is like, whoa. And have you seen that gentleman and his tribe in Africa? I mean, they have a relationship with these hyenas, and I guess it's because that they've always fed them scraps and things every night that they don't come into the village and bother them whatsoever or take livestock. But this
Interesting.
dude, yeah, Nat Geo did some really cool stuff about it. But yeah, he will and his friends will hold meat in their mouth and such. And these huge hyenas, man, this guy looks like he's probably around 6 feet tall. And this thing's almost looking them in the face. You're like, dude, that's a monster.
Oh, I would not have the courage to do that, man. What if the hyena decides, I want the meat, but I want your face as well?
You know what that reminds me of? One of those straight up cheese versions of Lake Placid after the first one. The first one was all right, but in one of them, this guy keeps feeding the giant, I don't even know what they were at this point in time, alligators or crocodiles, but he runs out of meat and then they eat him because he has no more to throw. And he's like, easy, guys. But yeah, seriously, I would just make that reference. As you just stated, you should never try to fully trust something that can consume you. I
Right. And you
mean,
know what? That is a
yeah.
perfect segue into this story, dude. So I think you and your audience, you're going to enjoy this, but I want everybody's opinion once we're done talking about this. So the Choctaw, they tell a story of how the Bigfoot, or as they used to call it, was a Hitak Luso Chito. Okay. They had a peaceful coexistence with these things. They would come down from the mountains and they would, they would trade with them. They would, exchange food with them. And they had a very peaceful cohabitation where they could just cross paths and nothing happened. Well, one day, these Bigfoot decided, you know what we're getting from them isn't good enough. These scraps, this just isn't filling our bellies. We need more. So the Bigfoot started taking the children and the women of the Choctaw tribe, right? They were taking the kids and they were finding them cannibalized. They were finding their bones, stripped of meat, stripped of flesh. And so the Choctaw thought, we have to stop this. Okay. So the chief, he gathered up some warriors and they went out to go fight these things, but the Bigfoot were just too strong, too large in number. Okay. So these warriors had to retreat, go back and think of another battle plan. So the Choctaw medicine man got involved. Okay. And he decided the only way they could stop these Bigfoot was through supernatural means. Okay. So what he did is he did these special incantations and these special chants that turned a very select group of warriors into the Hitak Ifo. What that means is man dog. All right. So what they basically turned into were bipedal wolves that had supernatural abilities, supernatural strength. And so these Hitak Ifo ran off and they faced down the Bigfoot. Now, a lot of the dogmen perished during the battle, but enough Bigfoot were lost in the fight where the Bigfoot retreated. And the Bigfoot found new territory and they never bothered the Choctaw again. So what do you think of that?
Yikes. That is some bizarre, terrifying, nightmare fuel stuff right there. I mean, not only is that another terrifying legend or encounter from the Choctaw, but it has some really interesting things that I noticed as you were talking about that. Because at first I was thinking potentially maybe they would have had like the cynocephala that was having in the encounter or the battle with the Dogman, but it sounds like more or less maybe skinwalking to an extent. That
In a way, that's why I found this really fascinating, Kenny, because it was kind of taking the Yinarushi stories and kind of turning them on their ear a little bit. Because as we know, Yinaradushi are seen as negative and evil things. But in this case, the Hitak Ifo were seen as I guess, the heroes of this story, because it was their might and their canine aggression that drove these Bigfoot back and drove them into different territory. So that's taking that whole skinwalker belief that the Navajo have, and it's putting a different spin on it.
No, that's great stuff. What's that old saying, though? An enemy of yours
enemy is my friend.
Yeah, there you go, man. That just makes me think that would somebody be willing to potentially pick the lesser of two evils, I guess, if something is occurring? I mean,
judging by this story, though, if you follow the story, they made these Hitak Ifo purposely. So they selected warriors that fit the bill, and they did the special magics that turned them into the Hitak Ifo. So these things were the good guys, and it makes me wonder if maybe when people see dogmen in the Native American burial grounds, if it's not really the dogmen that we know, but it's the Hitak Ifo. Maybe that's why they don't really attack them. That's why they're not hurting these people, is because they have a human subconscious there, some kind of human element where they're aware enough to know, well, these aren't the Bigfoot that we were created to fight. They're just here being curious, so we're going to drive them off with false displays of aggression and scare them so they run away.
Yeah, no, that's some straight up interesting and bizarre stuff. And I do think there is definitely, as you stated, a difference there, because in my mind, I was just thinking, again, I guess no one could really supposedly figure this out until we have full proof, but picture the cynocephali with their swords and armor and such. Man, if they were fighting with, we'll say, Alexander the Great, right, and such, I don't know if Sasquatch would fully put up that much of a battle against them. What do you think, man? That's pretty badass to be the cynocephali and then carrying weaponry and stuff as well.
I think it would make for one heck of a pay-per-view. I really do. Sure, they're going to have swords and shields and armor and whatnot, but I don't think Bigfoot's going to cower away. I don't think Bigfoot's going to see these guys coming and be like, oh, let's get out of here. No, I think Bigfoot's going to be brazen enough where it's like, this is our home, this is our turf, so we're going to put up a fight, and if you enough of us, then maybe we'll run away and, live to fight another day. But I think Bigfoot would put up one heck of a rumble. I really do. Especially with their strength advantage, because they're so big compared to the Hitak Ifo. You always hear that Bigfoot's bigger than Dogman, and size does mean a lot when it comes to a fight like that. So I do think that Bigfoot would kind of be a force to be reckoned with,
Yeah, and granted, it wasn't a bunch of Roman soldiers, but in one of the Choctaw lores, when they approached them with a bunch of the five brothers and their father that were supposedly the best horsemen and capabilities of shooting bows and all this stuff, and then you have the best tribe members and all them. So it's not like they were all decked out, I guess, in Roman armor, but they weren't like a bunch of nobodies either. And there was only 3 of them, and those things didn't seem to cower away whatsoever. So yeah, it is something that is really interesting for sure, like you were saying. And
and it kind of lends credence to the whole belief that the Choctaw had a lot of problems with Bigfoot. Because you got this story, then you have the Battle of Lafleur County that you mentioned earlier. So it goes to show that the Bigfoot in that area, for some reason, they just did not get along with the Choctaw after a while, that they just decided to become these literal monsters. And it kind of makes you wonder what it was, what event transpired where it turned them from gentle to so aggressive.
It's so great that you say all that before I bring up something else about a hyena that you're going to love. There is some interesting hypothesis, and I am jumping on board myself, where these great scientists are speaking about how same thing with dogmen are being misclassified just all as one thing, whether it's the hyenas that we speak about, they'll still be listing as a dogman, but it could be a cynocephali. You see what I'm saying? And, there's all the loosely based things. Well, they believe the same is occurring with Sasquatch and Bigfoot, that they are dealing with portions of Neanderthal and primitive man that do still exist in mountains and such, because there's evidence supporting that Neanderthals and Denisovians were actually around a lot longer than we presume they originally were. And they were very Neanderthals were all about eating Homo erectus and our ancestors and such. Okay, they were definitely something that modern day humans would not have wanted to really spend that much time around because, yeah, sure, they were smart, but there's a reason why we fear anything that looks like us, and especially when we see the pareidolia in the forest and see faces and such. I mean, and then you have the documentations of Neanderthals consuming us. So if you look at that aspect, okay, they ate people, they lived in the mountains. The Neanderthal wearing fur and things could look like very much a Sasquatch, which could definitely differentiate in some of the sizes. And then now, yes, you have the Gigantopithecus, which just recently they have found some more jaw fragments as well as teeth and a part of the spine, which now they are more than optimistic this thing was bipedal. And if you look at how modern day humans evolved as well, we were all eating berries and foraging, but then, Homo erectus started eating meat and such, and people can go out there and look at how, it increased that section of the species, intellect and brain capacity, all kinds of things. Okay, so bears are omnivorous, and there's a ton of animals that have changed their diets over time. So what they believe has happened with the Gigantopithecus as well is, even though their teeth were kind of like ours, meant for not necessarily consuming flesh, so that they were encroached upon, okay, by modern day humans. And they were forced into a small area that was not their natural habitat. And they had one of two choices: either go extinct or start becoming omnivorous now, where they would be consuming flesh as well as also berries and other things that they could get their hands on. And they would have been 12 to 14 feet tall. So you have all these different behaviorisms. So I think some of it is coming into play with some is the Gigantopithecus. I think some is Neanderthalish. And I think some are other primates that are just escaped potentially.
Yeah, I agree with that. In fact, the whole Neanderthal belief, I mean, in Canada, in Nahanni Valley, they actually talk about how there's two different types of Bigfoot up there. There's the Nahanni, and then there's the Nukluk. And the Nukluk were said to be, Neanderthals. They were cavemen. They actually are said to live in the caves that dot the valley over in Nahanni Valley. So there is some precedence to that. And I think it is a very extreme possibility that maybe what we are seeing in some cases, not every case, is a Neanderthal. I really do believe that.
Yeah, isn't that so cool, man? I mean, and it shows just the facets again of someone, might be calling that a Bigfoot, but it's a Neanderthal, and vice versa, which it explains why sometimes tree banging, yes, that is something that a human being can do as well. But that is also something very prominent in primates and things. So it's just interesting to see the difference in behaviors in certain areas. That's all.
Yeah, I agree. And I think when people differentiate all these different types of Bigfoot, I think we have to be careful, even though I'm guilty of it myself. I think we have to be very careful. I think maybe they belong to one species, but I think different areas have different behaviors, because like in Canada, way up in the cold areas of Canada, they're going to be a bit more aggressive, because like food's not going to be so easily available. They have to hunt. They have to chase down their food, and they have to, unalive their food in order to eat. So when they come across humans, do they really know the difference between prey and a human? I think human falls into that category of prey sometimes. So I think we have to be very. Yeah, I mean, for me personally, if I'm out in the woods all by myself, I'm hungry, and I happen across a group of humans, well, yeah, I'm going to be hungry enough where that aggression is going to kick in, and I'm going to pick me off some humans so I can fill my belly. I'm not going to go hungry and starve. I'm going to eat what I can, and if a human is what I have to eat, then so be it.
All makes logical sense right there. And Monday night with Robert Prevost, we're talking about some more of the ancestors that really fall into line with potential dogmen. And there was a new species of, it first fell into the hyena realm. They gave it to the king of the hyena, but then it didn't fall into the hyena realm. But then they found more of the skeleton and such, and they decided again it is a hyena. So, yeah, this is what we're rolling with. And it was a head crusher. There was different versions of rhinoceros at this point in time, but this one was pretty big. It was larger than modern day rhinoceroses, but it wasn't the largest one of all time, just so people get an understanding. It's still a dang big thing. It crushed its head, and they believe the rhino survived the initial attack, but they don't know, what its fate was, but it crushed it literally from its like snout down, like where the eyes kind of connected. It just literally pulverized it. And they believe its type of hunting techniques was, again, crushing of the head. So it's just interesting.
That's interesting because, some big cats do that too. They won't go for the jugular. They go for the face. And the reason why they do that is because it's the easiest way to dispatch of your prey. Because the prey can't see, so they can't really struggle too much. They can't breathe, so you're going to suffocate it, and then you're going to crush the skull. And that's instant unaliving right there. That's, boom, you're done. So I think, this hyena species, that showed some intellect. That was some adaptation that it made to dispatch of its prey in a quicker, more efficient method.
Yeah, right. And man, if there's any way to go out, none of those ways would be great. But being consumed alive by like a shark or a bear or something would legit be the worst. Yeah, at least have some courtesy, right?
Right? I mean, just, do me in before you decide to eat me. I mean, come on now.
Yeah, man, the bears are legit. I've heard just some straight up gnarly horror stories, man, of them finding people that actually somehow were still alive and were able to be saved, but had been like partially consumed and then buried in the cache. So this bear was coming back later. It's like, dude, the mental trauma that individual forever is going to endure is just insane to think about. Like, to put yourself in that situation with zero hope, because obviously if you're buried in the ground at this point in time, you would have lost your hope. I mean, come on now, like, wouldn't the hope have been at the beginning that someone was going to come and stop all this? But then these people are digging up the cache and they realize, oh my gosh, it's the hand and it's moving, and the person's in there half consumed kind of ish. It's like, oh.
That is nightmare fuel. That is straight up adrenaline fueled nightmare fuel right there, dude. Oh my gosh, a bear doing that to me, that is a nightmare for me. I don't ever want to see that happen, man. And I've encountered
that's what I mean
bears.
about like, real life nightmares, bro. They're out there, man, and there's no exaggeration. That's proof. Bears exist, and that's what they do.
And they can run super fast, man. Years ago, I was chased by a bear. So I know how quickly these things can run. They're no joke. They are absolutely not anything to mess with, ever.
I can only imagine. And then just a little bit more nightmare fuel for you before I let you blow some more minds. The great white shark, too, or just any shark. Imagine that, being in the middle of the ocean as it bites you in half because you're still processing what's going on. And you're just sitting there floating as you watch this beast come back to consume you. That's like, man, that's definitely stuff that is nightmare fuel.
Wow. That's why so many people are afraid of the water, bro. I mean, they know there's sharks in that water and they do not want to go in there. And I don't blame them. I mean, I love sharks personally. I'm fascinated by the Carcharodon carcharias, the great white. But being eaten by one of those, I don't love them that much. I don't love them that much. No, absolutely not.
Yes, I'm with you, man. Sharks and stuff are super cool, man. But if you want to go swimming, go in your bathtub, go in a place that, I don't know, that's meant for swimming. Don't jump into some running river with a known Nile or saltwater crocodile population and expect good things to occur, dude.
So here's a little trivia about me. I will not swim in a place where the water is dark or murky. I will only swim in pools. I actually will not go swimming in ponds because I don't know what's in there, and I've seen way too many horror movies to ever test it out. So I will not swim in dark, murky water. Absolutely not.
I mean, you're not wrong, though, because in all those tropical areas, I mean, again, nightmare fuel, but facts. I mean, during the medieval times and even up to now, people were consumed by large catfish. And I mean, if people are like, no way. Yeah, go look out at some of the sizes of the Wells catfish and some of these other catfish. No exaggeration. They're like, what, almost 13 feet long or something? You're like, dude.
Right. Yeah, I mean, even catfish, you don't want to get caught with one of those. No, absolutely not.
You mean you don't want to go noodling, man, and just shove your hand in there? That's always been, not very smart.
I tried that once a long time ago. You got to remember my dad was a Cajun guy. So catfish is always on the menu. So my uncle actually took me on a fishing trip one day, and I thought he meant fishing, the reel, the casting out and whatnot. No, that's not what he meant at all. He meant the noodling. Dude, I got my hand cut open by a catfish. The palm of my hand was split wide open. It hurt
of course.
So bad. I mean, to know that a fish did this, I'm like, wow, I am not going to go noodling ever again. I'm done. That's my last time. It was my first time. It was my last time. I'm out. Peace.
I mean, can you blame them, though? I mean, if I was sitting there chilling and someone's just shoving their hand in my place, I'd bite you too, man.
Sure, I can blame them. I mean, that was my hand that it messed up. So,
well, get it out of my face.
There was some aggression there. I was like, man, really? I really do wonder what events transpired where in some areas the Bigfoot went from docile and gentle to suddenly being man-eaters, you know, because like, you hear stories of how when certain discoveries or explorers came over that they handed out blankets and these blankets had yellow fever. And you also hear stories of how Bigfoot contracted this yellow fever, and this is why they turned against humans. You know, so I'm very curious to what people might think as to what event or events even turned Bigfoot from this gentle giant to this man-eating monster.
Some interesting stuff right there for sure. And I mean, this is just potential thoughts on it. I mean, I think it has a lot to do with climate change, man. I mean, encroachment on the land, and also just points in time where inevitably things are clashing that might not have been clashing in the past. Just like an example, it's a newer phenomenon where orcas are just consuming livers from sharks, specifically six gills and also great whites. And
interesting.
Marine biologists are baffled.
Yeah, well, I guess it could be adaptation. You know, maybe it was just that their food supply was running scarce, and well, humans were a readily available lot, and they decided, well, let's eat these. But what's interesting about that story too, though, Kenny, is it kind of turns around the whole story that today's people talk about, how Bigfoot's the good one and the Dogmen are bad. You know, I mean, how many stories do you hear, Kenny, where, you know, people say Dogman is evil, it's demonic, and then people will tell you, but Bigfoot's a good thing, it's gentle and it's loving. This whole story kind of flips that on its ear. It does a whole vice versa thing.
You know what's super baffling about all that, though, too, is there's a ton of indigenous cultures that mention them coming and raiding their villages, man. I would say it's probably like, what, a 50-50 split between good and bad? I mean, I don't know. It doesn't really seem like it's a clear cut. And also, though, it doesn't surprise me. I mean, the cynocephali weren't reported to be this culture that specifically, you know, went out of their way to do good. They pretty much had their own depiction of what needed to be done for their purpose. So sure, they came down and traded and such, and sure, they picked sides with Alexander the Great, but also he was battling them too, which means they disagreed or obviously sided with someone else on something, okay? And they would also consume the bodies of the fallen warriors. They would take them back to the caves. Why would they not also consume a living one? I don't know.
Right. I mean, it's similar to the medieval werewolves, too. If you guys look farther enough back, in medieval times in Europe, werewolves were actually seen as a positive and good luck sign. And they have tapestries where they've drawn them where they're riding horses and they're assisting the knights in battle. You know, and then over in the Celtic area, you have the wolvers, which were supposed to be dogman-like creatures that would feed travelers who were lost. They would give them shelter and feed them fish. You know, so different cultures have these different impressions of these dogmen-like creatures. You know, the Choctaw have the Hitok-Ifo, which they were the hero figures in this story. So it kind of makes you wonder what happened where werewolves or dogmen became these evil creatures in our minds. Is it because we watch so many werewolf movies where they're the big bads, where they're always hunting humans and, you know, filleting us and devouring us alive? Is it pop culture that's dictating werewolves bad, Bigfoot good? It's really perplexing, and I think we need to get to the bottom of that.
Great stuff right there. And I think before I respond to that, the only way anyone's really going to get the most clarity on that is being able to talk to the indigenous cultures. And from what I understand, like I said, they don't like to write things down because things have been misinterpreted and then given them a stigmata that wasn't supposed to have been presented like that. Right. So you really have to sit down and listen around like powwows and such and get to know individuals that have that type of knowledge. And I think that's probably the best way to really get a ton of clarity on that, because again, if you're just an outsider, you're not going to get that knowledge. You have to more or less just prove you're not worth, but just that you're not a troll, more or less. Okay. And then you're going to start to understand a lot of that. So I think that would be the most clarified way that we're going to find topics and information for it, because the rest of the stuff, man, people are always seeking answers for things, okay? And no matter what, we have to understand stuff. And because of that, we sometimes come up with things that aren't necessarily occurring to make it seem and understand what it is that just happened. Meaning, yes, you just might have seen that face in the forest, but, well, were you thinking of somebody? Have you just lost a loved one? Like, there's logical reasonings as to why you thought that shadow was a face or something. And I'm just going to give you a great example with like the chupacabra, okay? There are numerous people I respect, including like Forrest Galante and all kinds of other people that are very optimistic that the bush dog, also thylacines, coyotes, wolves, all these beings and animals with mange would look very creepy, and they all could get mange, okay? And there's also a record of a slave ship for animals that did crash in that area with a bunch of Tasmanian tigers on it, thylacines. Right. So interesting. And the very first woman that reported seeing this, okay, when this whole, I don't even know what to call it, broke out, she had just got done watching Species. Okay.
I am
Why
so
is the depiction, of the El Chupacabra legit exactly to what she had just seen? Sure, I'm not saying she didn't see something, but she had obviously just spent, 2 hours or however long that movie is, indulging herself in that, scaring the living Christmas out of herself, and then she sees something. But here's some more clarity to that. Out of all the animals that were looked upon, sure, they had some sort of punctures in their throat. Well, any animal with teeth is going to puncture. And yeah, canines have elongated canines. I mean, okay, sure. Well, none of the blood was drained from them, like they had said. And even if some of the blood was drank, animals drink blood, man. Okay, it's nutrients in it, dude. But no, there wasn't drained of its blood. So there it is right there, too, just sometimes about how when something's installed in your mind, you end up thinking like you're seeing it, but you're not, man.
Mm-hmm. That's very true. The mind sees what the mind wants to see. So if you convince yourself that you're going to go out into the woods or out into the night and that you're going to see something, you've convinced yourself that there's something there. So your mind is going to concoct that imagery, and you're going to be fooled because you wanted to see something. You were so determined that you made shapes out of nothing, pretty much. It happens a lot. It's, also pareidolia. That's a thing. So it does happen, unfortunately.
And people just really need to look at that and understand that misidentification in things is a very true aspect to people that aren't familiar with things. I mean, I'm not one to ever put people on blast, but I don't know how many times in groups I see people posting something that is a very small canine track. Yes. Oh my goodness, the Dogman around my camp. It's like, nah, dude, that's like a coyote track, man. Like, the lack of understanding to an extent about just animal behaviors and things is mind-boggling sometimes, and
it's problematic at best. It's problematic, yes, Kenny, because I do say this to people a lot, and I think they take it the wrong way. But I tell them, if you're going to study cryptozoology, you should have a basic knowledge of biology itself. So you should know animals in the area. You should know what kind of canines you have running around, what kind of felines you have running around. So that way you know how to identify the noises, the tracks, the scat, the fur. So that way when you're out there, man, you don't come across a coyote track that's a little bit bigger than you suspected it would be and go, oh, that's a Dogman. You have to know this stuff. In fact, you should know about wildlife anyway. If you're going to be someone that goes out into the woods, this is something you should know anyhow. This should be common knowledge. But if you're going to try to find cryptids, you should definitely 100% absolutely know the animals that are known and that live in your area.
Preach, man. And that's why it's always humorous when people will call like a journalist an armchair researcher, but then there's people out there just holding up their phone. Oh, Dogman hunting. I'm like, yeah, how many times you gotten any luck with that right there? Good stuff,
Right. Right. Well, you know what? As far as them calling journalists an armchair researcher, look, every kind of researcher is needed. We need the armchair guys. We need guys like Kenny that are the journalists, okay? We need the people that go out and do this physically, that get the cuts and the bruises and the scrapes from going into the woods and falling down the hills and looking for physical evidence. We need all of the above. All of the above. That is the only way that we're going to get the answers that we seek, okay? Teamwork makes the dream work. So don't ever invalidate an armchair researcher. Don't invalidate a journalist, okay? They all have their place.
Great stuff right there, man. And I think too, as I think about it more, the encroachment aspect really would make the most logical sense. I mean, look at dolphins, for example. I mean, river dolphins, there's not really that many of them left, and they haven't been treated the most kindly by people. And there's a video of a girl on an expedition, and they've actually postponed these expeditions after this. And she's playing with a river dolphin, and the ball goes in the water. She goes in after the ball. Yeah, probably not the smartest decision. And as she's getting back up on the raft or whatever the heck, the inflatable, the dolphin decides to take a nice, gnarly chew at her ankle, pretty hardcore, man, and like start to drag her back into the water and thrash her around a bit before they swim off. And
Ouch.
yeah, that's the sign right there of a species just getting tired of encroachment on its area. It's no different than when you see, like I was explaining to you before, this large elephant. I knew what it was up to. I mean, this giraffe probably should have had an idea too, but elephant's just looking like he's gonna, do something frigged up, and the giraffe's just drinking water. Sure enough, he comes over and just charges him and disembowels this giraffe that runs off. Okay, just another example of get out of my area. I don't want you here. Hippos, infamous for that too. So now if they already kind of have a natural attitude towards things like that, then it's going to be amplified in human contact. But now even if you take something that's docile, like I said for dolphins, man, if you encroach on something enough, it doesn't matter how nice it is, it's going to eventually come to a point where it needs to defend its territory for its existence. So I think that might play a lot into what's happening.
I think you're right. Actually, that kind of brought to mind the story of the Davis family, the father and son up in Canada. It involved an attack by the Otneyarhe, the Jinoskwa. So what these guys were doing is they were up in that territory and they were hunting. They were on a hunting trip. They hired a native guide. And as he was taking them past this island, he told them, Kenny, don't ever go to that island. Whatever you do, don't step foot on there. Don't take the raft over there. That belongs to the Otneyarhe. Okay? So they made camp on the opposite island because there was two islands pretty close together. So they made camp on the opposite end. Well, the son, who was a young man, probably about 23, 24, decided, because this native guide told me not to do it, I'm going to be brazen enough to go and do it. Okay, so he snuck away from the native guide, got into the canoe that he had, rowed over to the shore. Well, the guide noticed he was missing, right? And he started looking for him, and he caught sight of him just as he was pulling the canoe up onto the shore of that forbidden island, okay? And he kept yelling for him, come back, come back, come back. The father ran down in a panic because he was like, okay, he's not supposed to be there. And as they're sitting there on the shore, Kenny, they see something big, this big hair-covered giant just bolt down from the hills, chases after the son. And they see them running through the woods, right? They can hear the trees snapping, the limbs breaking. The son manages to get away long enough, and as he's running towards the canoe, they see the Jinoskwa right behind him. He grabs this young man by his hip with one hand. The other hand, he grabbed him by the head and just ripped his head right off. And so I think this Jinoskwa, it did it because this human being had the audacity to step foot on its turf, and this is why the native guide told them, don't ever go there. That was encroachment right there.
Wow, that is straight up gnarly. And as you were saying that, I was just digging through the files in my brain. There are some pretty interesting indigenous lores up in Canada about a tribe of dog-headed people that lived in the ground, and it was documented pretty well. But also there is another interesting case of apparently these, I don't know if it was 2 or 3 brothers that were supposedly dog-headed, and they were put on this island, and this medicine man one day pulled himself across on basically an old raft by, like a long rope, and he had these 3 supposedly bright blue gems that were of some sort of power, and then he heard a wolf howl that startled him, and he dropped the gems in the water, but one of the brothers dove in and got them up, and he explained that they were for them. And then one of the brothers decided to, I guess, marry that guy's daughter, and apparently she had a mysterious look too. It was pretty interesting, man. Hammerson Peterson was talking about it.
Oh, very cool. When you look into the indigenous lore, bro, you uncover so many fascinating things. It's so strange how you start looking into that, and the world just opens up, man. These doors just get kicked open, and you become aware of things that you weren't even expecting before. You're just kind of like, whoa, this is something I need to look into. And I actually encourage everybody to really start looking into the indigenous folklore. You're going to find something for everybody, okay? And you're going to find some really magical things. And if you want to learn about that stuff, reach out to those people. Reach out to the indigenous people. Be respectful, be kind to them. And if you earn their friendship, man, they're going to start sharing some fantastical stories with you.
Yeah, no, it is truly mind-boggling for sure. And like I said, it is, I believe, pretty much how we're going to probably find a lot of the information that we are looking for. I mean, it's all there in front of us. We just need to pay attention to it. So, I mean, we've discovered stuff in Greek and Roman history, so it's no different than looking back in theirs. But yeah, before we let you get back to what you're doing, my friend, do you have anything else you'd like to touch base on? Or
well, other than my podcast starting up again, which I hope you'll be a guest, Kenny. I would love to have you on a regular basis so we can, chew the fat and, get some information out there, man. I think it'd be great for both of us. But other than that, that's my focus is, looking into this Bigfoot Dogman war and getting this podcast up and running again. And I would love for people to swing on over and maybe be a guest and tell some cool encounter stories.
That's great stuff. And of course, man, I mean, you come on here bi-weekly, I can definitely allot some time frame for you for sure, man. Just,
Awesome.
If you did make it this far tonight, you truly are legends, and I adore all of you. Please like, comment, subscribe, and feed the algorithm. And I will see you very soon.